Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective, and this is my co-host and head practitioner, Shannon Callery. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how's it going today?
Good. And, just like a heads up for everyone listening. We're recording this the day after we had the Optimizing Gut Health Masterclass. I'm definitely wiped out a bit. My voice is doing okay right now. It was starting to go last night. I'm hoping it'll last. Also, my brain is a little just not 100% today. So just bear with us a little bit. We also know that there's a lot of the energy this week is pretty heavy and we can feel it. And literally every single one of our clients is feeling it. So we're sure you probably, or many of you are also feeling it too right now. So yeah, we're all working through it and doing our best right now, which is a great kind of intro into our topic today. And what we wanted to talk about today is, when we inevitably undergo a time of stress, something big happens in our lives or we've got a lot of stuff going on. When stress is really high, what are some things that we can do to really support our body during that time? And, even if you've done a lot of work on yourself, whether you've worked with us or maybe another practitioner or anything, we're all going to go through periods of stress, of high stress. It's just a natural part of life. And, I think for me, after a lot of my own healing work, big healing work with supplements and protocols and all that kind of stuff, I would get really nervous when I would undergo periods of stress and be like, all right, well, am I going to have an autoimmune flare? Is my cortisol gonna plummet? Am I, what's going to happen to my gut at this time? And there are some things that we wanted to talk about today of, when this happens, how do you support your body? What are some things that you can do to make sure or, do your best to prevent massive flares, a lot of health issues coming back, different things coming up. So that's what we're going to dig into today here.
Yeah. This is absolutely one of, I would say hands down, almost every client asks us this, especially our SIBO clients, is what do I do when I'm done with the protocol? I don't want to go into a massive flare and have to do this again. For anyone who's ever had any issues, or even if you haven't had issues and you are just a high stress person, this is going to be a helpful episode for you. And a lot of these things too, they're going to be things that you've heard us talk about before, basic liver supporting stuff, nervous system work. We are going to go over a handful of those things, but ultimately we're just hoping you can use this episode to help guide you, maybe help you slow down during a stressful time.
Yeah, exactly. And, once again, we all go through this, a great example this week, last week and this week was a lot, preparing for this masterclass and, we've got a bunch of other things on the back end going on. And, it's just January is typically December and January are usually pretty busy for us. And so, we're going through it. Shannon is planning a wedding, been there. That was the last time I went into a flare was planning a wedding.
Yeah. I'm trying so hard right now to do everything I can to not let that happen. But yeah, it's just one of those things that's really, really stressful and it's hard to not let it take over. But and then we talked about this too in our couple episodes ago, whenever we did our introduction to the new year. This is also the time of year where it's very fast-paced energy. Everyone is getting into new things. There's new shifts happening in our lives, new year for work, new goals. So in general, like this time of year can just feel like really stressful and like we have to be doing all of these different things.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people I know feel like the New Year's blues. I feel like there's another name for them too, but kind of the dip going into January, February, where it's typically for many people super cold. A lot of people have been hit with some snow here, who maybe aren't used to getting snow. I know Florida got snow, which is crazy. And, it's still pretty dark. So there can be a lot of stress around this time of year. And, once again, we're all going to go through periods of time of high stress, and it doesn't have to destroy your body. It doesn't have to set you back or put you in a flare or anything. And there are some, once again, like we're just going to talk about various tools that you can use. And I think the first one I'd really like to start with, and what we typically see, and definitely what I've seen across the board working with clients for a decade at this point, is the first thing to go when someone starts to undergo a lot of stress or get into the stressful period of time is the mindfulness piece and the nervous system regulation. And that is like the first thing that drops off, which is the opposite of where we need to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is the easiest thing to go out the door. And I would say one thing that we can do when we notice that happens is, first of all, notice that you're letting that go. Like if you are a person who's doing mindfulness work regularly, tune into yourself, just slowing down in general. Like when we're starting to feel really stressed, really rushed, maybe we're not getting the best sleep, the best thing that we can do is just like slow down, check in with ourselves. And that's when we're going to realize, okay, hey, like I need to add in some breath work, maybe add in like a walk, a meditation, just something to help get my mind back on track.
Yeah. And this is, once again, it's almost like you should be doing the opposite around this time, is like double down on the mindfulness stuff. And a lot of times, especially for me, is when I recognize that I'm like undergoing a lot of stress, I actually add in at least one extra session of some stillness, of even just like deep breathing, doing some heart breathing, putting my hands on my heart and just breathing. And look, this doesn't have to be, you don't need 20, 30, 60 minutes to do this. Literally, even just 1 minute can go a really long way. And one of the things that typically happens when we undergo a lot of stress is sometimes our cognition isn't as good, and we might feel like just this overwhelm, our brain's constantly going. And one of the best ways to help recenter that is with the mindfulness work. And meditation during these periods of time may not be the best option for you, especially if you're not super into meditation itself, or maybe even like a walking meditation may be better. But doing something that can kind of distract your mind almost a little bit and really force it to be present, breath work, gosh, is amazing, because you have to kind of think about it, and you're concentrating on that versus, all of these things that are going on in your brain. And that's a really valuable tool. It's just like take a minute or two and do just some deep breathing, throw on a guided breathwork session, just something.
Yeah. We got really, to me, I feel like we got lucky. So this past week has been just the energy all in all has been like very, very overwhelming. I'm also doing like some heavy metal stuff right now. So my brain anxiety, wedding stuff, it's just felt like off the charts. I'm in Texas, and we also got snow here, and it shut everything down for like 2 solid days. And it almost felt like it needed to happen because it was just so nice, like fresh snow, which you don't see in Texas like ever. And it was so peaceful. Everyone was like outside in the community playing in the snow. Like we took our dog out to play in the snow for like an hour. And I realized like, oh my gosh, this was so needed because it forced me to slow down for a minute and like just focus on reality instead of everything else that was going on in my mind. So something as simple as like getting outside and taking a walk and looking at the trees, the sky, noticing things can really help like pull your brain kind of back connected with your body?
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I have such a long history of anxiety that is definitely like one of the first things that comes back, and I just get all in my head, and my brain just wants to go and run endlessly and think about all the things I need to do. And then, depending on where I am, sometimes I start to replay, my entire life and all the decisions I have ever made, and all the things that could happen in the future and decisions I may want to make or need to make in the future, And for me, getting back into my body goes a really long way. And I've really noticed that, especially as I'm traveling, and I am in the same place for several months at this point in time, but doing a lot of traveling and moving around and not having like a quote unquote like home base necessarily, just going and sitting on the just goes such a long way. And, if I can, for me, I'm a fire sign, I'm a Sagittarius, like I do run pretty hot as just like a human, and sitting by the water in particular, if I can like sit on a rock or sit on the ground by some water, gosh, immediate grounding. Immediately, I just like feel like I can take a deep breath again. The brain starts to slow down, and all of that kind of comes back into just like the present moment, and goes such a long way. So yeah, taking a walk, even just going and sitting on the ground, going and touching a tree. Like for me right now, even just like I'm letting some fresh air in. It's not the warmest outside. It's not super cold, but just like getting fresh air, being able to smell that, have that like, oh, it woke me up right before, hopping out of here to do this, and woke me up a little bit more, woke my brain up a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, I feel like some people overcomplicate this, and it doesn't have to be one particular thing, but when high stress situations happen, usually most of us end up in our brain and really end up in our head, and anything that help us get back into the present, help us get back into our body, that can go such a long way.
Yeah. We do overcomplicate it. And it's just part of that, I believe, is because we have so many things thrown at us or so many things available to us, which is great. But when we're really stressed out, it almost needs to be as simple as possible, just to help us get connected with our body again. And another big thing that we can talk about here is when we're going through periods of high stress, making sure we're supporting our body with the right fuel. So trying to eat the best that we can. And that is also something that we overcomplicate, which can be very, very easily simplified. So I just had this conversation with a friend who is very high stress right now. She has 3 young kids, and she had recognized that she was not fueling her body properly just because she didn't have time. She was reaching for like just not the best food. And we just talked about making it really simple, like getting frozen veggies to save time so you don't have to cut up veggies, like pre-cooking some chicken so you have something made. Like just making these tasks as simple as possible, but also knowing that we're fueling our body with the right food, which is also going to help our brain and our mental health and our nervous system and all the things.
Yeah. And this is so good, especially because I feel like when people undergo high stress, one of 2 things happen. One, and I fall into this category, when stress is high, cortisol gets high, my appetite drops. And I'm just hungry. Even just like looking at food sometimes, I'm like, oh, doesn't sound super appealing. Just like anything. And I'm not a person to skip meals. And that can happen definitely when undergoing high stress. And so, and then people can go the opposite way, especially if you tend to self-soothe and comfort yourself with food. Oftentimes it'll go the other way, where you're just like constantly trying to grab food and trying to like put something in your mouth. And oftentimes usually that's either something really salty, which is common with cortisol. As your cortisol goes up, oftentimes we'll crave that salty, maybe even like fried types of food. Because our body's wanting the salt and the sodium, because our adrenals are burning through that, among many other minerals, but our body's kind of burning through that. And then you're just, or it's sweets, and you're just like, let me eat all of the sweet stuff, which also is not going to be great for for your brain, for your gut, for anything else. And once again, it's not about being perfect here. It's like, if you can prioritize the protein, gosh, does that go such a long way? The protein and the veggies, and even trying to eat like more quote unquote normal type of meals for you, whether that's like 3 bigger meals or whether that's like 4 or 5 smaller meals, whatever that really looks like. But having at least a little bit of something around that time can be really beneficial. I'm always a big fan of, and this is not something I'll recommend to like most people, but during high times of stress, getting a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, and especially like some of them are decently clean and don't have a lot of like extra and added ingredients. I mean, that's super easy. Throw some meat in the crock pot and have that. I mean, that's pretty easy. Having like some snacks like meat sticks or jerky, super simple. And there are pretty clean brands like Epic, Chomps is pretty good. There's Paleo Valley's pretty good. There's some options here, and just having that prepared goes a really long way.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge piece to this too. And then another thing, just kind of adding on to that, I feel like when we're in this high period of stress, we're tired, we're not sleeping well, we wake up in the morning, we might be tempted to reach first thing for the caffeine on an empty stomach. And again, that's like another thing, like I know it's tough, but pushing that to the side, trying to get some good protein in, a good meal, and then having the caffeine, that can make the world of a difference for not setting yourself up to go in like a cortisol dysregulation spiral. I know it's super easy, but if you're that person, like just try switching to even a hot cup of herbal tea in the morning. Just like if you feel like you need something, switch it up to that and just wait to have the coffee, because it really can do some damage. Then you're going to start to affect your sleep later in the day, your energy levels, and it can really spiral from there.
Yeah, blood sugar dysregulation, for women, especially like form of sex hormones, we can develop some imbalances there. So yeah, that's a great point. Also, like adding in adrenal cocktails around those times can be super beneficial. Once again, like those for some people can give you some energy. If you're not used to drinking them, start slow and small at partial recipes. Don't do a whole thing, because that can sometimes not be helpful to you. But yeah, making sure you're not doing the caffeine on an empty stomach. If you can get out and get some natural light in your eyes throughout the day, especially in the morning, but I would say at any time throughout the day, just to try and keep that circadian rhythm pretty well intact. And that, once again, like sleep is usually one of the things that is often not the best when we're undergoing a lot of stress, and that just getting the natural light at any point in time throughout the day, particularly though in the morning, can also be super beneficial.
Yeah, and I know we just recorded this episode last week, so pretty fitting, but also hydration, trying to keep up with your water intake, just because water does so much for the body. That's a really big piece to this too. And that's typically one of the first things to go, I would say, when people get stressed out, is we're no longer focusing on how much water we're getting in throughout the day if we're like very high stress, bouncing around, doing a lot. So yeah, again, just, adding a pinch of sea salt to your water, getting the extra sodium in to help your adrenals, because we do burn through that very quickly. Really big thing. Also adding in, if you're looking to add in a supplement, I would say adding in some magnesium would be a good option. And also, if you feel like you're mentally fogged, just because we're talking supplements, lion's mane is also a really great one to add in.
Yeah, I was also going to say cordyceps can be another good one to add in during this time. Cordyceps can give you some energy, can give you a little bit of boost. And the kind of mechanism behind this is the cordyceps help increase the oxygen that's delivered throughout your entire body. So it can help, it's often used for lungs. Certain people, it's in certain pre-workouts, like people can use it as like a quote unquote pre-workout. And so that's another good option that can just like naturally give you a little bit of energy without being overstimulating. And yeah, the lion's mane is a really, really good one, especially if you do start to notice, especially if your brain's just, once again, like a little bit everywhere, the lion's mane can just kind of help a little bit, just to refocus you and help with that cognition and clarity a little bit. Because I know, like for me, my brain starts to go all over the place, and it can be a little bit harder to focus and concentrate on one thing. And the lion's mane can go a really long way. If you're looking for a brand, we do very much like Real Mushrooms. We'll put a link down below. That is our favorite brand. One, it's very clean. It's also one of the few brands that really uses just primarily the fruiting body of the mushrooms versus the mycelium or the stems, which don't carry quite as much of the medicinal properties as the actual fruiting body. So, and it's, it's third-party tested and everything to prove that it's actually more effective. So that can be a really good option. Definitely any of those. If you're in the middle of winter and you feel like you're getting sick, you could add in turkey tail. That's a really good one to add in there too. That might be supportive.
Yeah, definitely. Just because when we're stressed, there are certain physical shifts in the body that is happening, like our immune system might not be functioning the way that it normally does. Our stomach acid gets depleted pretty easily during times of high stress. And this is really for numerous reasons, like, maybe we're consuming more alcohol, maybe we're eating more processed foods. Both of those things naturally lower our stomach acid. Stress in general can lower our stomach acid, which that right there is kind of like one of our first lines of defense in protecting our body from pathogens, could affect our immune system. So some of these supplements might actually be beneficial to add in, like the turkey tail, maybe a stomach acid support supplement like some HCl. Or you could keep it simple and just do a little bit of apple cider vinegar mixed with water to help replenish your stomach acid levels. But that's also a big area to focus on too, just to make sure things don't get too messed up during times of high stress.
Yeah, I would say if you have a history of any sort of gut issues, gut overgrowth issues, the HCl with pepsin is something I 100% always have a massive bottle on hand, because that is like one of these, if not the first thing I add in, one of the first things I always add in. And man, is that such a huge protector from, once again, like, especially if you have SIBO, like just really making sure all the food is properly being broken down. Pathogens are killed, all breaking down our food. That goes such a long way. And once again, like as someone with a long history of SIBO, parasites, all these gut overgrowth issues, I mean, that is really like one of the first things I add in immediately to make sure that I'm protecting my gut and making sure I'm digesting my food. Because after you've done like all of these gut protocols, you do not want to go through them again. They're a lot, and it's so uncomfortable. And so that's such a great line of defense.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a fairly easy one too. I mean, as much as we don't like to rely on supplements, in these cases, taking supplements can make things like really easier for an extra layer of support while you're going through high stress. Another thing too that's popping up is I am a person, and many people are, who tend to get a little bit constipated when stress becomes higher. Sometimes it's the opposite for people and they get loose stools, but maybe adding some sort of bowel support in, like Smooth Moves tea by Traditional Medicinals. That's one that we really love. Of course, there's really good bowel stimulating supplements out there. There's one called Motility Activator that's linked in our full script. But maybe just having something on hand to make sure you're keeping your bowels moving so your system isn't getting backed up. That's also super important.
Yeah, because once again, especially if you have a history of like chronic inflammation, gut issues, you do not want to be reabsorbing those toxins, because that's going to contribute back to inflammation and can, feed into the gut overgrowth things again. And that's, it's also just really uncomfortable. No one wants to feel constipated. It's not a good feeling. So having that support in there, once again, like for me, I always have Bowel Mover from Cellcore. That's one of our all-time favorites as far as like bowel support. But yeah, that's another thing I always have on hand as needed, just in case kind of thing. Because yeah, especially if you're traveling a lot, like most people have a harder time having bowel movements when they do travel. So if that's like part of your stress, a super, super good idea to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And piggybacking off that, just any added support we can give our liver during that time is going to be beneficial. My go-to for stress, just because it's kind of a multifunction as far as like mindfulness and liver support, is going to be an Epsom salt bath. It just helps relax my body. I know it's supporting my liver. It's probably my go-to thing that I do when I'm stressed out. And of course, there's other things like dry brushing, castor oil packs. Some people really like rebounding, but just trying to get some extra liver support in is also a good idea.
Yeah, and I would also say just being mindful. One of the things that we need to understand when we are under a lot of stress is we need to look at what can we control and what do we not have control over. So if you're someone who, likes to do a lot of rebounding and really sweat or go really hardcore on that, now might not be the time to do that. While rebounding can be really good and beneficial, be mindful. Same thing with, I think, of like the sauna, of, spending too much time in the sauna, because it can be a lot. But yeah, I mean, the castor oil packs, the baths, dry brushing, that's really supportive. I'd say the same thing with coffee enemas. While coffee enemas are really supportive and great for the liver, just being mindful. If you're not used to them or don't do them a lot, they can be a lot. And our whole goal here is not to add more stress to the body. It's really to reduce stress and how we support our body so it's not quite so stressed as we're going through some of these, more uncontrollable situations, which also leads me to talk about movement. Movement at this time is great. And, for a lot of people, this is their primary stress outlet is workouts. And typically, a lot of those people are using high intensity interval training of some sort, or running, or some sort of more intensive kind of working out to do this. And while working out is great and movement is great, it is also a stressor on the body. And so once again, we just need to be mindful of the total stress we have going in our body. So for me, I'm someone who typically strength trains 2 to 3 times a week. This might mean for me lighter workouts. Maybe this is more body weight versus like using heavier weights. Maybe this is a little bit higher rep, shorter workout sessions. Maybe I'm swapping out one of those workouts for like a very gentle yoga, versus like a more intense, like lifting kind of session. So just like something to think about with this.
Yeah. And that goes for all of this too, because I know if you're listening to this, there are plenty of people who will be like, oh, I'm going to do like this, this, and this, and try and add in like 6 or 7 different things. And in general, if you're already feeling really stressed out, start slow. This isn't about adding more things on to make your life more stressful. Just pick the things that sound the easiest to you, like, taking a bath, maybe adding a supplement or 2 in, focusing on food. You don't want to make this like more stressful on your body. That's not the goal here.
Yeah, and I think an important thing, like one of the things that I've really learned, and I see this with, certain people that talk about like the health and wellness space, is like, what are your things? What are things that are most supportive for you? And really trying, and I know it can be hard when you're already under a lot of stress, but learning to tune into your body, learning to just learn more about yourself and what is most supportive for you during high periods of stress. And what does that really look like for you? For me, the grounding piece and getting back into my body is a non-negotiable. Like that goes such a long way. And I need, and so like for me, that's a big thing. Another big thing, and this goes into like my love language, just like touch, just like human touch, whether that's like a hug, some cuddle time with a partner, or a little furry, cute animal. Just, that really fills my cup up and really goes a long way in helping me relax. Same thing, like adding an extra like session of mindfulness. Once again, like usually I do a morning and the evening one, and this, during high periods of high stress, I might add in one during in the middle of the day. And just like before during my lunch break, before I hop back on calls, taking just a couple minutes to breathe, to, maybe listen to, some binaural beats, something like that. That goes such a long way for me.
Yeah, my things are also very similar, and it also shifts and changes for me. The number one thing is always going to be getting back in my body and feeling connected, like my mind and my body, because that's like the first thing that usually goes when I get really stressed. But I also have to pay attention to what am I most resistant to doing at that time. And that usually lets me know like what I need the most. And I feel like that's pretty common for most people. Like whatever we really want to avoid and don't want to do is probably the thing that our body needs at that time.
Yeah. And, sometimes that, when we undergo a lot of stress, we can fall back into old patterns. We can have, some things come up, anxieties come up, just some different things. And if you are feeling resistant to some stuff, like that's a huge sign that that's what needs to happen. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to focus on. And sometimes you just need a little bit of time and space to be able to do that. For me, I now get nauseous, and I know I've talked about this before, but I get nauseous when I have to cry, and I'm pushing it down, and so I'm very in tune with that. And just like this happens a lot for me when I get really stressed out. Is I'm like, okay, starting to feel nauseous. I know I need to cry. I've now learned this about myself, that this is 100% what is going on. I need to cry, and so I need to set myself up for that. And if I don't have a lot of time, I need something to help provoke that in me. So that might be like listening to a sad song. The moment I turn on the notebook, I just immediately start to cry, just every single time. So, it's just really like there's a learning process about yourself that goes a really long way, and understanding what do you typically avoid when you are under a lot of stress, and how does this come up for you? And are you averting back to a lot of old patterns during that time? In which case you might be getting tested with some different things, because it's time to start to really focus and change these patterns. And not that we're trying to give you extra work to do, but also just be aware of this. It goes a really long way. And sometimes this really just adds fuel to the fire of, things are coming up, extra stress is coming up for you to deal with some things that maybe you've been avoiding, or maybe there's a real push to change, make some serious changes in patterns that you're doing. So, just some things to think about.
Yeah, and those are all really, really great points. And that is really a huge part of this. If you can get to know yourself and know those patterns, it goes such a long way. And in one of the big things, like for you, you mentioned the nausea thing, like in that being a sign that you need to release something and cry. One of the things that I do, and this just happened to me, was I will like start to get really busy or like clean and stay really busy, but I'll notice that I'm like feeling frustrated. And that's an indication that I just need to also cry, slow down, just release some sort of emotion. But just being able to pick up on those patterns is huge, because that prevents you from maybe going on a week-long span of this behavior that's shoving these emotions down and making you more stressed, as opposed to letting it go on for a day or two and then being able to resolve it. So that's a huge difference there. And that's one thing too that we always talk about, is just like slowing down and getting to know yourself and your patterns helps you with so many different things. So that right there, even if you're not under high stress, is a great place to start. That is actually something that you would want to start to do when you're not in a super high stress situation. It's just like in general on a daily basis, like slowing down, checking in with yourself. That's just a really good habit to get into.
Yeah. And, I think this is important to talk about too. And, I this happened to me last year, so it's still like pretty fresh on my mind. But, a lot of us as women, and for those women who are listening, a lot of us revert back to like go, go, go mode, into like doing mode, busy mode when we undergo periods of stress, which push us back into our masculine energy. And, for me, after, last year, after I made the decision to leave my marriage and sell the house and everything like that, one of the big things that was coming up for me, and I can't tell you the number of times I had this conversation with the people who were supporting me at that time, was I knew as soon as I made the decision that whenever I told my partner at the time that, this is what I needed to do and what I wanted to do, that I was going to be pushed into my masculine energy pretty hardcore for several months. And I mean, that alone, I was just dreading that so much because I knew how uncomfortable that was making me and how much I wanted to be soft and flowy and feminine, and how much I was not going to be able to do that. And, for me, I had to be really intentional in the free time that I had and the moments where I could slow down in tapping back into that. And that also helped me a ton to kind of get through that like 3-month period of time where I was pretty much every day just being pushed more and more into my masculine. My to-do list was so high. I was in charge of everything, like was doing so much by myself, and it was just so uncomfortable. And so when I could, having these outlets to dance, to put on a dress, to wear my hair down, like things that made me feel good, things that made me feel feminine, getting a massage, especially towards the end, I did like a couple different like little mini spa days, for myself, just to like really give myself some extra support and be able to receive and to be able to be soft. And so that was super, super valuable. So just kind of also something to think about, if you're kind of balancing and working on this masculine, feminine energy, kind of shifting and flowing between these two, that, yeah, sometimes when we're under a lot of stress, like we're pushed really back hard into this masculine energy, and that can not feel good, for many people. And so being able to find these moments to be able to shift back into that softer, more feminine side can go a really long way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we're actually going to do a full episode on the masculine and feminine energy again pretty soon here. But that is a really great point to bring up. And we naturally bounce back and forth between the two. Like we're never just going to be fully in one, but especially when we're going through high stress, it's pretty common to flow back into that masculine energy side. So yeah, just again, something to be aware of, where if we're in touch and we can see it ahead of time, it's going to be much more helpful to come out of high stress.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think one of the last big things we need to talk about is sleep, because sleep is something that can be a real struggle here for a lot of people when we are under a lot of high stress. Once again, especially if you have a history of cortisol issues, like if you tend towards some of the anxiety, shifts in the brain starts to really go, like what can we do to help support sleep?
Yeah. Sleep is such a big one too, because it sets the tone for your following days. And so much happens while we're sleeping. So that's a really big part to this. If you tend to get very anxious when you're under a lot of stress, one of the tools, besides the other things that we talked about, like the binaural beats or listening to frequencies, maybe doing some breath work before bed, those are all great. But another really great tool is called brain dumping. And it's just writing down like everything that you're thinking about, writing it down on a piece of paper or your phone, whatever you choose, getting it out of your head so you're not thinking about it all night. These things aren't just like sitting there lingering. That can be a really, really great tool to help you sleep better. And I would always recommend trying some sort of like mindfulness activity like this brain dumping before adding in a supplement. Supplements are great. There's things like cortisol manager. There's a supplement called emotional wellness that are really great for helping during high stress times, especially with sleep. But starting with something like this, I would recommend that first.
Yeah, brain dumping is super good. And even if you are someone who tends to wake up and then be awake for a while, especially during high periods of stress, keeping that journal, that notebook by your bed. So doing brain dumping before you go to bed, and then also just having it there as a tool. If you need it, if you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain just like starts to go, just pull that out, just like write it all down. And that can be super helpful for helping you get back to sleep.
Yeah. And even with sleep too, we have to remember that when we're sleeping, we also process things in our dreams too. So you might notice that you have like some pretty intense dreams or potentially some vivid dreams during periods of high stress. That's not uncommon because our subconscious is actually trying to process things while we sleep, which can also wake us up. And again, like writing these things down and maybe seeing patterns can also help us decipher like, oh, this one situation that maybe I didn't know was really bothering me is clearly bothering me.
Yeah. And I also think having some sort of, even if it's not 100% your normal like nighttime routine, still having some sort of pre-bedtime nighttime routine, even if it is shorter, can go a really long way. Because if you are just like under it, going all day, lots of stress, brain's going, and then you're like, okay, well, it's time for bed. That transition can be really hard and take forever, which can also like add to stress, be super frustrating. And so still having, I'd say maybe at least 30 minutes of like a prepared downtime or preparation, kind of in preparation for going to bed and for sleep, can go a really long way. Dimming your lights, blue light blocking glasses can go a long way. Doing a mindfulness practice, doing the brain dumping, just having, washing your face, brush your teeth, do your skincare routine, like just have some downtime. Make sure that nothing that if you're reading something or watching something, I don't recommend scrolling on the phone, which I do know a lot of people tend towards, but even if you're watching TV or reading a book, like making sure it's not very stimulating. I always have like, I do like watching an episode or two of something in the evening that is just like very comforting for me and relaxing. But they're all like, right now we're watching Friends, like, and I've seen Friends many, many, many times before. It's very like low key, The Office. I love Ted Lasso. That's like a go-to for me. Modern Family, just shows that are generally pretty light, short. Maybe you've seen them before, don't require a lot of attention or focus. Like that can go a long way.
Yeah, that's so funny that you brought that up because we just started watching The Big Bang Theory, which is like just another one of those like really easygoing shows. But yeah, I love that show. And yeah, it is important to just to be mindful of maybe not adding extra stress on by watching something that's like maybe like war driven or like super violent before you go to bed, even reading books like that, because that's just going to keep our minds stimulated, maybe make us a little bit more tense than we desire to be before we're going to bed. So another really great point just to pay attention to that.
Yeah, no true crime podcasts before bed. Just be mindful of what you're intaking, in the evening before bed. And just, it shouldn't be stimulating. It should be light. It should make you think, I know for some people, they're like, but I love all the murder stuff and it's relaxing to me. I get it. I understand. And it's not, it is stimulating for you, whether it's like consciously or subconsciously. So just be a little bit mindful of what you're intaking in the evening before bed, and try and keep it light and something where you don't have to think a lot about.
Yeah, exactly. But other than that, I feel like those were all the basics. Sleep is definitely a big part of that. But anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Just a couple other supplements as far as like sleep relaxation is concerned. Reishi is a really good one. I'm a big fan of that. Once again, like Real Mushrooms has a great one. They do powder and capsule versions. We listed a few others. L-theanine and GABA go a really long way. I actually added in, as of last week, Hello Ned has a product called Mellow. And it's magnesium, L-theanine, and GABA, and it's a powder, and you can mix it right into water. Sometimes I'll mix it with a little kombucha as like a late afternoon kind of little treat kind of thing. That goes a long way. I know for me sometimes too, when I'm under a lot of stress, sometimes I have a hard time absorbing magnesium in capsule form, and sometimes my body desires some other forms. So this powdered one is a really good one. I do feel like I absorb it when I'm under stress, like a lot better. I also have like a magnesium spray that I always keep on hand, and I'll just put it on the bottoms of my feet as as I'm getting ready for bed and things like that. And that can be a little bit easier to absorb on the body too. So the other thing I do, and this is something that is a tool in my toolbox. It will not be a tool in everyone's toolbox, but microdosing. When I'm under a lot of stress, I make sure to add in microdosing on a consistent basis. Right now it's something I do pretty intuitively, and just like, am I feeling this today? Is my body desiring it? What does that look like? What's the dosage look like? But when I'm under a lot of stress, I notice that is also one of the first things that typically goes in my routine, and I have to actively remember to kind of bring that back in on a consistent basis, like 3, sometimes 4 times a week. And I mean, that is hugely supportive of energy, focus, cognition, tuning back into my body. And once again, like, this is not going to be the case for everyone. And if you're like brand new to microdosing, doing it when you're under a lot of stress, be sure to work with someone. I would just like randomly start that by yourself. When you're under a lot of stress, it can be supportive, and please do it with someone, because that does go a really long way. But that also is very, very supportive for me. And, just kind of going along that route, if I feel like I'm processing a lot, or there's a lot going on, and I'm kind of maybe struggling to make certain decisions, or trying to get some extra clarity, I'll do what we'd consider like a mini dose of the mushrooms. And once again, this is not something I would just like randomly do or do by yourself. I have enough experience in the psychedelic space that I do feel comfortable doing this by myself. And I do have a partner who has also quite a bit of experience in the psychedelic space, and like making sure that I do have support if needed. My last time I did this went a super weird way. But and thankfully I did have support because I needed it at that time. And so that is super helpful. But that's another thing that I will often use as a tool for when I'm under a lot of stress.
Yeah, same. When I first started microdosing, I was really, the whole thing, which I'm sure you've heard us say, is supposed to be very, very intentional. Like, that's kind of the point of it. But I had very specific things that I was targeting when I started using microdosing or doing microdosing. And now it's kind of to the point where I still do it regularly, but again, when I'm under a lot of stress, or I'm feeling completely like mind-body disconnect, that is absolutely one of the first things that I will go for, because I know it's going to help me get back in my body, give me clarity, help me slow down, whatever intentions you're focusing on. it's an incredible tool for that. But yeah, I would not recommend doing it on your own and not having support for like the first time, or even just like getting into it. I do recommend having some support while you're doing it. But once you've done it, it's a really great tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah. And if you are interested or want to learn more about this, we do have a program that I lead. You do have to do a specific kind of consult. And we'll put a link down there. It's a microdosing consult beforehand to make sure you are a good candidate for that. So we'll put that in the a link for that in the show notes. And then the other thing that just came up for me is, especially when we're under a lot of stress, and if the stress is you caring for a lot of other people, and that particular kind of stress, blocking out some time to be cared for in some form or fashion can also go a really long way, whether that's taking a walk with a friend, having a phone call with a friend, going to get a massage, acupuncture, whatever it might be, whatever, once again, like feels supportive for you, but receiving can go a really long way, and allowing yourself to be taken care of, even if it's just for a short period of time, that goes such a long way. And once again, like that can help us get back into that more like feminine, flowy, less on the to-do list kind of energy. And so that can go a really long way. So, we're all capable of receiving support if we choose to and allow it to happen. Key phrases right there. And so that can go a long way. And you don't have to pay necessarily, even do like, but it was sound bath or, like something. And there's all kinds of free events all over the place of different ways that you can be cared for. So just, scheduling, a little time block once a month, once a week, like whatever that kind of looks like for you, depending on the stress and how long you're going to be under this stress, like can also go a really long way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because receiving energy or just receiving help from other people is something that can be even difficult to ask for yourself. Like maybe asking someone to cook a meal for you. It can be something as simple as that, but that is a big piece of this, especially if you're caring for a lot of other people in your life. And it can also make you feel really good and be the world of a difference if you're really stressed out and struggling. Just having someone do something for you and actually letting them do it and not feeling guilty about it and receiving some of that good energy from it.
Yeah. And I know for me, like this was a really big pattern that I had to work through and continue to work through in asking for help and then not feeling guilty or obligated to necessarily like reciprocate right away with this. And this has been shared with me with two of my mentors. So I will also, share this with you. If you have a hard time with this, if you have a hard time asking for help, if you have a hard time receiving and feeling this guilt or obligation to reciprocate, if a friend or family member, someone that you care very deeply for, that you really care about, that you, just have a lot of affection, like love for, if they came to you and said like, hey, I am having a really hard time right now. Like, would you cook a meal? Would you take a walk with me? Can I vent to you for 10 minutes? Like, and you do that and you say yes. Like, doesn't that make you feel good? Most of us, it's yes. The answer would be yes. That does make me feel good when I can be there and support someone else. So why would you deny someone else that same joy of being able to provide that for you? And just, it's something to think about. Like most of us feel good when we can help a loved one, and just like be there as a support system. And so why would you deny them that same joy? So, for me, it did take me a few times to hear that, for me to listen, but it is something that I now have taken to heart, and I very much, embody that, and it is a lot easier for me to ask for help now, but just something to think about if you fall into that category.
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard, I'm also a person who struggles with that, and I haven't heard it like worded that way before. And that's such a good point. I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a real juicy one. That once again, like that really shifted things for me and shifted my perspective on that. And once again, I did have to hear it a few times. But once I heard it several times and let it really sink in and feel into that, yeah, it became a lot easier to make those shifts. So yeah, just ask for help, ask for support. People like to give you support. I promise, like it makes all of us feel good to be able to help someone out when they're struggling. So don't deny them that. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good list, a pretty comprehensive overview of ways to just support your body during stress. Anything else you wanted to add, Shannon?
No, I think I'm good. I feel like we covered some really good topics.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining and listening. And we hope you found this helpful. Definitely save this one for whenever you, once again, inevitably go through a period of significant stress, and just listening to this can just remind you of different resources that are available and different tools and techniques to help support you during this time. So yeah, thank you for listening. We will see you next week. As always, please subscribe, follow. If it resonates, a 5-star review really, really means the world to us. And we will see you next week.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.